Welcome, Matt Young.
All right, thanks, Chuck. And hi, everyone. Really glad to have you here for a talk about product roadmaps. Before we get started, thanks to all of you for voting for this talk and your interest in what we've got to say. It is super flattering. Like Chuck said, I've got about 25 minutes of content to share, so feel free to drop questions as they come to mind into the Zoom chat, and we'll gather those up and try to tackle as many of them as we can at the end. And thanks, of course, to Product Camp. If this is your first one, you're in for a treat. They continually put on really great events, and especially thanks to the sponsors who are here footing the bill and making this free for all of us. So my name is Matt. I'm the CEO of UserVoice. If you don't know, we make a product that helps SaaS companies capture and analyze feedback both from their customers and from their internal teams and use it to help shape product direction. So why am I here talking about roadmaps? Well, two big reasons. The first is that we study product management, and we do that in an effort to make the most helpful products that we can. And roadmaps are obviously a big part of any product manager's job. And second, we're often asked to add public roadmap functionality to our own product. And none of us was really interested in duplicating what's already out there in terms of roadmap management software. And I couldn't put my finger on why that was. And like any good product managers, we put on our research hats and we got to work. And I want to share what we found out and offer some advice to help make your roadmaps work harder for you. Now, before we get into all of it, this dog, Banks, is my puppy who's in the picture. I'm super happy that we're doing this live and not pre-recorded like the past year has been. But if you've ever had experience with the combination of German Shepherds and male people, you know I live my life constantly just milliseconds away from explosive barking at all times. So if that happens, I apologize in advance. And over on the right there, I need to acknowledge my whole work family for all the work they've done that's feeding this talk. They've gathered thoughts from more than 1,200 people to shape what we're going to present today, and I hope it's really useful to you. Now, you can't give a talk about product roadmaps without acknowledging this book. Product Roadmaps relaunched by C. Todd Lombardo, Bruce McCarthy, and others. And this book has really held up over the years. So I encourage you to read it. Not only is it good foundational backing on roadmaps, but just product management in general. Let's spend a few minutes getting us oriented around the many interpretations of the word roadmap. We PMs, we need to be great communicators and build alignment and understanding. And I don't want to neglect that duty here when so many people think of something different when talking about roadmaps. So what's the root purpose of any roadmap? What's a great product roadmap supposed to do? It's supposed to express the ways in which your product is going to help your organization meet its overarching goals. But the word roadmap is used in different organizations to mean a bunch of different things. Strategic planning, tactical planning, communications. In a lot of cases, they're talking about a document to represent these plans. And today we're going to be talking about those documents and how to make them communicate better. There are a number of groups of people who get use out of a roadmap. And the first audience I want to talk about is your coworkers. You probably produce one of these roadmaps. It's never to be shared outside the physical or digital walls of where you do your work. And when you deliver a roadmap to your company, you can be really blunt. You can say things like, we're doing this to make headway into the enterprise market, or we're doing this in response to rising competition from whoever your biggest competitor is. That's the inside baseball that you just never say to a public audience. These roadmaps are invaluable in keeping everyone rowing in the same direction, and they're one of your best tools for communicating product direction within your organization. But today, we're going to focus primarily on roadmaps that you share to people outside of your organization. When it comes to public roadmaps, there are two major audiences. The first one, it's for your sales team and it's for your customer success team. It's a teaser for what's coming next to show direction and pace. And these are really useful in closing deals. And what's great about them is that you're guaranteed that there's going to be a conversation between the customer or prospect and an employee of your company. And as a PM, you can debrief with your colleagues to find out how the customer reacted to what was on your roadmap, what resonated with them and what they didn't care so much about. But when we shift our attention to a truly public roadmap, and this is the one that you hang out on your website for anyone to see, I think that's when the anxiety starts squirming up in the back of your head. And I can be a bit of a control freak. I think that's a common trait among many of us in product management. So if I'm going to put a roadmap out in public, I have some worries. Are people happy with what they see on the roadmap? Am I getting pinned into expectations of delivery times? Am I telegraphing our strategy to our competitors? And does this take away my ability to change our plans based on new discoveries, the way the market changes, or when a pandemic hits and everyone's world just changes overnight? But more than anything, I want to know what's inside the heads of the people who are reading the roadmap. We as PMs, we've done a lot of work behind the scenes. We've validated plans, we're doing research, we're doing discovery, and you're putting a roadmap out there in public. It seems like it's all risk and no reward. And we hear a lot from PMs that we speak with that you're opening yourself up for judgment. Our insecurities have us thinking that our customers are looking at the roadmap and rolling their eyes, or even worse, they just don't care. Through the research we've done, I'm no longer afraid of public roadmaps. And in fact, I'm really excited about the opportunities that they present for our industry. So today, I want to propose a better way to present a public roadmap. Earlier, I said the roadmap is supposed to express the ways in which your product is going to help your organization meet its overarching goals. Well, in a roadmap that your customers are looking at, they just don't care what your company's goals are. They care about how your product is going to solve their very real problems. So right there, I know that any public roadmap, it just needs to be different from a roadmap for an internal audience. I want you to move away from your roadmap being a billboard or a one-directional piece of content that often looks more like advertising than anything else, and turn it into something conversational. And why am I confident that this is a good move? Well, we researched roadmaps from the perspective of product managers, but more importantly, from the perspective of end users of B2B SaaS software. We wanted to find out what their expectations of a roadmap were, or even if they knew what it was. And in the end, we asked more than 1,100 users of B2B software products like Slack, Microsoft Teams, the Atlassian suite of products, design tools like Figma, et cetera, about their experiences with looking at a public roadmap, taking surveys, and providing feedback to product teams who make their products. And we also conducted dozens of Zoom interviews, both with end users and with product managers of B2B software tools, to get a lot more in-depth color. So it wasn't surprising to get confirmation that the concept of a product roadmap is a foreign one to most users of B2B software. But this is both good news and bad news. The good news is that there isn't a set of expectations that you'll have to fulfill. And the bad news is that our expectations about the value of a roadmap is just not necessarily shared by your users. Your customers do want to know what you're working on, but they don't think about it all day, every day like you do. So when we put out a roadmap, we've got to do it in a way that is understandable to your audience. So what are some of the changes that we can make to make your roadmap more consumable? And here we're looking at the OG roadmap, the Gantt chart. Now, dates, of course, they're okay if you're comfortable with them, and even if they're not very specific dates, general timeframes like quarters or half a year, that's okay too. But I want to give you permission to get rid of the dates if you don't think that they're important for your business. The world has evolved. A lot of people understand how software gets developed, and it's not as predictable as any of us want it to be. In the SaaS world, we're continuously delivering improvements to the software, so dates are less critical, and we're moving towards a simpler model. And that's the lean product roadmap. Shows what we're working on, what's coming up, and what we're thinking about down the road. When you put all of this information on one page, though, it's both too much and not enough at the same time. There's a lot of stuff on here. It's hard to take in. Sometimes small changes that aren't all that important on the roadmap when they more properly belong in release notes or as a status update on a feedback forum. And when your roadmap has a lot of things on it, you find that the bigger, more impactful changes, they don't really have very much information about them. Quick title and a text description, it doesn't often do a good job of conveying the problem you're trying to solve and the solution that you have in mind for it. Here we're looking at a Kanban board for software development. And this is something that we're all used to looking at every day. Things move from left to right as they get worked on and eventually completed. And it's tempting to use this as a format for a public roadmap, but I don't think it's a very good one. First, The word backlog doesn't mean much outside the context of software development. And second, backlogs are usually incredibly long. So what do we really mean here? We mean to show the things that we're actively considering for development. And in the middle, you see several steps: planning, design, development, and QA. And users don't care about this level of detail. All they need to know is that you're actively working on building something. So let's strike these extra columns and replace them with one. It's getting built. Now that we've got this condensed down to 3 appropriate columns, let's look at the next big problem here. What's the most important stuff on your roadmap to your users? Well, we learned that users are most interested in the things that they can use today, the features that you've already released. So if you're reading left to right, like most of us do, the most interesting stuff is way on the right when it should be the first thing that they see. So let's make the things that we've already released the headlines. We'll give the people what they want and show off the goods. And we've also noticed that a lot of companies are in the habit of dropping things off of a roadmap when they get released, and they're moving them over to release notes or other avenues of communication. Now, these features, they still belong in release notes and in-app announcements and all of the places that you're using to drive product adoption. But why not let them live on your roadmap for a little while and use that as a way to drive additional adoption? Give your team a pat on the back. They just delivered something great. Go ahead and show it off for a while. All right, next let's talk about how much stuff belongs on a roadmap. One thing that we know today, we're all really busy, our attention spans are short, and we learned that somewhere between 7 and 12 things on your roadmap is the right amount. You want to convey to users that changes are frequent and impactful, but you don't want to lose their attention. And what doesn't belong in your roadmap is anything that has less than a 50% chance of being done, say, in the next 6 months. That's just clutter. If you put things on your roadmap and they end up not getting done, you're losing credibility. And there's a place for people to talk about the multitude of ideas that could come later. That's an ideas forum, not your roadmap. Also, who says all of this needs to be on one page? We're not trying to present a project plan to people. We're trying to show them what's on the way, what's new, and what we want them to be excited about. So let's consider breaking things apart. And with fewer items in front of people, it gives you a bit more breathing room to talk about them. Images help a lot. Bullet points help a lot. But you don't want to say too much. The users that we spoke with, they're very specific that if it looks like a blog post, they're not going to read it. They came to find out what's new with your product, not to read a bunch of blog posts. This last point, this is the most important one. You have to speak to your audiences from their point of view. Rather than positioning how great, how innovative, how fancy your new feature is, just be clear about how it will help them get their jobs done. They'll really appreciate you speaking plainly in a matter-of-fact way without the marketing spin. They're already your customers. You don't need to sell them on it if it's really going to help them get things done. And one quick note, any one of the changes I've suggested so far, it'll help increase the consumability of your roadmap. So don't be afraid to start small and make the simplest changes first. They'll matter. All right, we're making some great progress. We've got a roadmap that looks great, communicates well, it's digestible, it's oriented around your users, but we haven't done anything yet to address that big worry we have as product managers, which is, what do people think about our roadmap? Shouldn't be a surprise to you, since we UserVoice are a product feedback company. We think this is a great opportunity for you to ask people what they think. And what do I want to learn? Well, when we're thinking about features that we're considering building, I want to know whether the problems that we're intending to solve are significant, that they're pressing, and that they're valuable for us to solve. After we've committed to building something, I want to know if our solution is appropriate. Appropriate is too light of a word. I want to know if people are excited about what we're building. And after we release a new feature, I want to know how well we hit the mark or how we fell short. We've got a really good opportunity here to use the roadmap as a communication channel. And it's not just self-serving for us. You're letting your users know that you're really here trying to design solutions for them and their problems, and they know that you're listening. Now, none of this is going to work unless end users are game to tell you what they think. So we asked those same end users about their attitudes about providing feedback to product companies. First, do people provide feedback about the products that they use? Overwhelmingly, yes. 93% of people said that they're providing feedback about the products they use on a weekly, monthly, or annual basis. They're most likely to provide feedback about the products that they use most and that are most critical to their work. A little caveat here, I think this number skews high because we did ask this question in a survey itself. So these people were already predisposed to answer surveys, but still this number is way higher than we thought it would be. So I have a lot of confidence in the overall motivation behind it. We asked people who didn't provide feedback about products why they hadn't done so. 88% of those people said that they never provided feedback simply because they were never asked. And that group of people who was never asked also said they'd be very likely to share feedback with software providers if they were directly asked and they could provide feedback without a big time commitment. We asked people about their motivations for providing feedback to software companies. We were worried that people would only get in touch when there was a problem or that they discovered a bug. And the good news here is that the primary reason that people provide feedback to software companies is because they want to help make the software better. They're willing to do this for free. Incentives were pretty low on the list of motivating reasons to provide feedback. What was more concerning, only 44% of people provided feedback, because they thought it would be valuable to the product team. And think about that for a sec. As product managers, we know how valuable this feedback is. So it's really on us to make it clear how important it is to hear from our customers. All right, now that we know that people are ready, interested, and willing to help, we set out to find the most agreeable experience for them. And after all, we know it's going to be hard to stand out from all the survey requests and all the NPS emails that we all get every day. So these next few tips are nothing more than general survey best practices, but you'd be surprised how many of us ignore these in favor of like really long-winded and frankly boring surveys. We asked about the circumstances under which people are most likely to reply to a survey. And the subject of the survey matters, of course, but it was interesting to learn that people tend to take surveys or offer feedback in small gaps during the day. You might be walking between meetings and you might be taking a break after you check your email, or you might be on your couch at home. And because of that, and this is kind of obvious, surveys need to be short. But one thing we don't necessarily think about is that they're probably on their phone during these short windows of time. So if you're asking for feedback, it's got to work on your phone. And in this case, we're talking about getting feedback about a product roadmap. So we need to make sure that your roadmap is optimized for mobile viewing. And it's a further argument that those wider formats like Kanban and a Gantt chart, they're just not necessarily the best tool here. How you ask for help is important too. Any good survey request will tell you what your expected time commitment is up front. Saying something like, can I ask for 3 minutes of your time to get some feedback on our product plans? That's good. It's telling people how much time it will take. You're not using the word roadmap. You're telling people exactly what you want. And if you've only got 7 to 12 things on your roadmap, you're only asking for a few minutes of people's time. Even better is something like, in 3 minutes, you can influence major improvements to this product that you use every day. You're telling people what the outcome of spending their time will be. Recently, we did some testing with how we asked people to provide feedback to find out what would get the best response rate. We tried 3 different behavioral science levers to entice people to leave feedback. We tried using authority. The email comes from someone important. We tried using a plea for help, appealing to people's natural desire to lend a hand when asked. And we tried exclusivity. We told people they were one of only a few people that we were reaching out to get their opinions. The highest open rate was achieved when the email came from someone with authority. In this case, it was me. To tell you the truth, it wasn't really me. It was our product team. They did a good job of impersonating me. And it had a subject that contained a plea for help. The highest click-through rate, the people who actually opened the survey and started giving responses, that happened when the body of the message contained a message about exclusivity. If you're interested in learning more about some of these research avenues, I'd recommend behavioralscientists.org. They study the way in which people react to different situations, and this is useful in almost every aspect of product management. After people share their feedback, really important to convey to them that what they've told you is important and that someone read their responses. You don't have to promise to do what they asked for, but everyone wants to know that they didn't waste their time sharing their thoughts with you. And this is really important for when you want to ask a second and a third time. Once we've enticed people to leave feedback, we have to ask the right questions. Here's a great place to put some of the really interesting question patterns in product management that we've seen developed over recent years to work. If you want to grab quick answers from people so they don't have to type a lot, we have a bunch of good options ready to go. Dan Olson's importance versus satisfaction question, measuring how important something is to people versus how satisfied they are with existing solutions. Raul Vora has spoken a lot about the product market fit question. How disappointed would you be if we took this feature away? These are really easy questions to understand. They're really easy to answer. And most importantly, they're very actionable for product teams. It's also really common to see thumbs up and thumbs down types of inputs in systems like these. We asked users to tell us what they thought a thumbs up was communicating to a product team. And the answers were all over the place. Very few people are actually answering whether they thought the feature was valuable to them personally. Most people were just saying that they like the idea in general, that it's a good idea, it's not a bad idea. And for us, that can be a red herring. Respondents might be saying they think it's a good idea, but for someone else, it doesn't necessarily translate into broad scale adoption in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean it's providing any value at all to them. So make sure that you're asking questions whose answers you can trust and that you can take action on. And that actionability is really important. If the answers to the questions you ask don't have the potential to change your plans, they're just not good questions. Good, reliable information like this can help you avoid sticking to your guns when it's no longer appropriate. And one thing we've noticed over the years is that once something ends up on a roadmap, it tends to stay there no matter what. And I try to keep my team thinking about whether or not we're falling victim to the sunk cost fallacy whenever we're confronted with less excitement than we expected. So if you're advertising a feature and it's not getting the reaction that you expect it would, roll up your sleeves and go find out why. Maybe we were wrong in our initial discovery. There's no shame in changing plans based on new information received. That's what being agile is all about, acting on good, reliable information. That's our product management superpower. And don't be afraid to put the brakes on an idea. Taking no action on something that has little to no value is one of the most efficient things that we can do. Earlier, I said I thought it was a good idea to keep features on your roadmap that you've already released. I believe that as an industry, we have an over-reliance on analytics to tell whether a feature is meeting customer needs. Analytics are essential, of course, but they don't tell the whole story. They don't let you see into the hearts and minds of your users, that your solution is helping them get their jobs done. Asking questions of your users about these features will help you know how they feel about the changes that you're making. So in the future, I think that we're going to propose an additional column for the roadmap. And that column, it should contain a continually rotating list of features that are already part of your product, and maybe they've been there for years. And we're going to want to ask people whether they're still as valuable today as they were when they first used them. Maybe the job they're doing has changed. Maybe competitors are showing up with better solutions, and it means you need to raise the bar. Or maybe competitors have come up with simpler solutions, and your solution now, by comparison, looks bloated. Engineering in SaaS, it uses continuous delivery to keep bringing value to the product. And we, in product management, we should be building systems of continuous validation to either reinforce our direction or help us pivot when we inevitably need to. So if you're able to keep your roadmap fresh with interesting content for your users and learn about what they think at each stage of the game, this is going to make the roadmap a much more powerful tool for you as a product manager. And these changes to public roadmaps, they change my anxiety about them into something I'm genuinely excited about. It's an opportunity to connect with our users, an opportunity to gain insights I couldn't get nearly as easily. But to do this well, we have to speak to users in their terms about their problems and how we as software providers can be of the most assistance. Research, it's one of the pillars on which we all build our profession. It's time consuming, it's difficult, and it's tiring. So I think we should let roadmaps take on some of that burden for all of us. And in the end, a roadmap is a really good way to decide how to get from point A to point B. And these days, I absolutely know where we are. That is, I know what point A is. But point B is a destination that I can't necessarily see clearly yet. And I like to think of our roadmap as less of a roadmap and more of a wayfinder, something that helps me forge a path in the right direction and continually lets me course correct to end up at the best possible destination, given the constantly changing conditions around me. So that's all I got for today. Thanks for your attention, for your interest in the subject again, and I'm really interested to hear any of your thoughts and questions. I am going to stop sharing my screen so we can actually look at each other.
If you have questions, please enter them into the chat, or you can attempt to raise your hand. It's been kind of iffy today using the raise hand option, and I'll be trolling through the participants page to see anything.
I saw we have a question from Marina. She says, you mentioned that a roadmap shouldn't be written in a marketing way, as these are already your users. Does that mean you would not share the roadmap completely publicly, but rather for current users only? That's a decision, I think, for every business to make on their own. There are some businesses that use their roadmap as an avenue to generate excitement from non-customers to see where you're going. And there are other companies that really prefer to keep it close to the vest in what they're saying. I think what I'm saying by putting it not in a marketing way is that I see a lot of roadmaps that are written with a lot of superlatives, and they're saying, this is awesome, this is the best, the best solution to this problem ever. And I think a lot of that tends to take a little wind out of the sails of the impact it can have to people. So as one example, a lot of roadmaps I see, the main title of the item on the roadmap is written in what looks like company vernacular, like they're mentioning lingo that they use internally or something like that. Or if you can be much more plain spoken and say something like, here is a job we're trying to solve for you, and then the details of it are more about how you're going to solve that problem for people. I've often seen titles like notification improvements phase 1. Like, okay, you're improving notifications, cool, but the reasons that you're improving notifications are always to enable a better workflow for people. So what are those workflows that you're trying to enable? Phase 1, phase 2, who cares, right? None of your end users know what that means, other than, all right, maybe you're going to do more work on notifications later. But I may as well make the headline, why are these notifications going to assist you in getting your job doing better, and what's that there? So it's kind of tough to do that right. But one way that we always do that, whenever we put together our roadmap, we start by writing out the bullet points. What are the details of like the benefits to the users? And by doing that, we end up coming up with a better way to title the thing in the end. So maybe working bottom up sometimes for people mentally is a better way to arrive at a conclusion there.
Thank you.
All right, let's go. Thoughts on listing items that are yet to go through discovery in the roadmap, meaning that you don't yet understand if the enhancement is viable for your target customer yet, so you haven't backlogged it yet either. I think that there's no problem with doing that in general. I want to be clear, like using a tool like this is a really good way to find people who are interested in it that you can talk to in more detail. It's kind of like a very early phase validation of discovery. What I would caution against is putting a lot of those types of things on a roadmap, so that you might get some people getting excited about a few things, and if they start to realize that very few of those things ever get done, they'll be less likely to get excited about that stuff. You can definitely use things in an early part of the roadmap. That's one of the reasons that we like to label that first phase considering. You're making it clear to people you haven't committed to solving this problem yet. You're considering it, and you're trying to learn more. So it's okay. You may not have the solution in mind, but you're just trying to validate the problem. I also mentioned that the middle column that we use, building, a lot of people mistake that to mean like that the software is being built. But I use that more to indicate like, okay, we've committed to solving this problem, and we may be working on designs, concepts for solutions, all that work that goes into like, hey, I've decided that that'd be something to that would be valuable to solve, so we're going to work on it. So all that level of detail, I think you can make clear in some of the text, like, hey, we're thinking about this, and just use it to set up some interviews with people and find out whether it should go farther. All right. Question for Maria. How do you balance building excitement for upcoming features with limiting competitors from gaining critical insights into your strategy? I can't tell you what your company should do. I'll tell you what my philosophy is on that. If you're onto something that is industry shaking and new, obviously you're going to want to keep that under your hat for a while. But most of the things that most of us do are improvements to areas of software that do have a competitor, or solutions exist. I generally believe that the most successful product companies are the companies that solve their customers' problems in the most effective ways. As the head of product management of UserVoice, I do not often get reactive to anything that any one of our competitors do. I want to stay focused on our users and how we can best solve their problems. So as such, I am not worried about sharing what we're working on, because my audience is my users. My audience is not my competition. UserVoice started in 2008. We were the first company to put feedback forums. There are 8 million different pieces of software that offer feedback forums these days. Someone's eventually going to copy your software. It's just the nature of the business. So your job is to do it better, anticipate people's problems, and get those problems solved sooner. So yeah, I wouldn't put something on the roadmap that's 6 months out that we think is going to be an earth-shaking new feature, but something's coming up in a couple quarters that's an improvement on something. I have no problem advertising that out there. Sarah would like to know any tips on how to share roadmap items that support different lines of business that just one product team manages. I'm going to answer that question a little bit differently. I think that roadmaps should be oriented less around product lines and more around user personas. So if you have the type of system that has administrative users, and maybe they've got, I think of like a POS system like Square. When you go to a store and you put your credit card in, there's that little tablet. Cashiers care about how that tablet experience is, like how easy it is to swipe the credit card, enter what people ordered for food. But then there's the person who does the accounting for the business that wants to see the result of all of that. And the features that are appropriate for the cashiers, probably, the administrative people don't care about, and vice versa. So I think it's a better bet to orient your roadmaps around the user roles of the people who are going to take advantage of the features that are there. No reason you can't have multiple roadmaps. I think that's often an effective strategy to keep the number of things on a roadmap small and light. Keep the little changes off the roadmap, keep the big important things on there. You'll be in better shape. Eugene, we work with a lot of startup CEOs who are first timers. They tend to give executive feedback that is way too detailed. How do you handle getting people to step back and look at the overall rather than the detail, all roadmap related when getting feedback? If I'm interpreting this question right, I think one thing I'd want to say, and out of the corner of my eye, the mailman is coming up my steps, so get ready for it. How do you handle getting people to step back and look at the overall rather than the detail? I like to call this problem the executive flyby. That can either come from an executive within your own company or a very vocal user, especially at a strategic account who's paying you a lot of money or something like that. I can't say that there's a right or wrong answer here, but I do think that systems of collecting feedback, I'd like to say that UserVoice is a very good example of such a system, really help you counter any arguments that come from executives that you disagree with a lot of data to help make your case a lot more. And you can take that feedback and you can associate it with what accounts and what people and whether they're in your ideal customer profile, and make sure that you are aligning what's been asked for with the strategy. Super important to make sure that the strategy is clearly articulated to be doing that effectively. I would say that if you get into disagreements a lot with an executive team versus a product team, it's usually a good indicator that not everyone is aligned with a clearly articulated overall company strategy.